So I'm Jillian Graber, Executive Director of Protect PT, which stands for Penn Trafford. It's our school district, and we have over the last 7 years have had a real surge and boom into our community for shale gas extraction. And so one of the things that we did was develop this tool that we're going to talk about today.
Great. So I guess I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Elaine Longlame. I'm a communication PhD candidate at the Annenberg School for Communication. And I'm doing my research on attitudes toward coal and gas in southwestern Pennsylvania right now. And I'm seeking to expand that research into understanding the strategies used by the fossil fuel industry to influence these attitudes. And so I have been sort of listening to a lot of talks. Isabel, I don't know if you've heard of the Halt to Harm Network. It's a really great resource that I would recommend if you're interested in networking. And so that's how I found Jillian. And she actually introduced her tool, and I thought this is so great. This is such a good tool for researchers as well. But I've also, like, I have to say, I come at it also from really understanding the need from it for it because of my own research. I've actually talked to people who are living right next to fossil fuel developments, whereas whether it's like a coal ash deposit, like dump basically, or like uh, like toxic treatment, waste treatment facility, which is usually just a dump as well. And I've talked to people who, like, their neighbors are dying of cancer, they have cancer, or they have respiratory illnesses. So yeah, I really, from that, I really sense that there's a very strong need for more awareness in the community and also in the research community. So that's why I thought I would make that tool available to folks here. Yeah, so it's gonna be, it looks like a cozy meeting. It's just gonna be the three of us, but I'm really glad that you could join us.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah, and I think it'll be worth it, even if it's just you. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get 2 more recruits. Shelly, you wanna start us off?
Yeah, sure. And is it okay if so we were gonna I was hoping to post this also on our YouTube. Is it okay if that happens? Are you comfortable with that, Isabella?
Oh,
If we
sure. Actually, I messaged one of my friends from a group that we had started, and I was telling him that I was going to come to this, and he was like, "See if you can get in, if you can videotape." I was like, "I have to ask," but that'll be perfect. That'll be so great. I'll be able to share it.
Okay, awesome. All right. Yay. All right. So let me go to the next screen here. So we're going to be talking about our environmental observations through our mobile app. And just a really quick introduction of who I am. So I work with an organization called Protect PT Penn Trafford, and we're a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring residents' safety, security, and quality of life by educating by engaging in education and advocacy to protect economic, environmental, and legal rights of people in Westmoreland and Allegheny counties where we're located. I started by getting a group of neighbors together in December 2014 when a well pad was proposed near my home. And 7 years later, actually April 27th is our anniversary, and we have grown considerably and have this nonprofit. We're small. We say we're small but mighty. And
Mhm.
our goals are to educate, empower, and engage our local government. Um, so we're going to talk about what we would report in our mobile app, and there's a lot of things that you can report in the mobile app, and we're going to talk about those things as we go along in our conversation. But I guess a question: would you know how to report this? And so, looking at these, first of all, I think can you make observations, or can you tell us like what you think might be wrong here? And then how would you report that?
don't know, it looks like there's some sort of discharge or something that's happening on the image on the left, and then the one on the right, the dead fish. So there's something amiss. It's calling a fish kill die-off thing. And I wouldn't know how to do that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the one on the left is a discharge of mud, or it could be also fracking mud or clay from HDD, horizontal directional drilling. Oftentimes, what's called bentonite clay comes up from the bed of rivers or runoff from pads, depending on the case, and that is an indication that pollution is happening. And then the second one, of course, the fish are dying, so that could be an indication that there's some pollution in the stream. And we would want to. This is something that we'd want to report, right? We'd want to observe that this is happening and report it. But a lot of folks don't know how to report that. And here in the state of Pennsylvania, you'd report this to a couple different agencies. You could report it to the environmental or the DEP, the PADEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, or you could report it to Fish and Boat, and they might actually be able to respond quicker because of the type of observation that we're having being related to water pollution, and who regulates that water pollution in your state and at the federal level. So in our state of Pennsylvania, we're regulated by PADEP for oil and gas development. And so those are things that we'd want to report to DEP. If we're talking about an injection well, that is regulated by EPA in the state of Pennsylvania as well as DEP. So we'd report it to both. So why is it so hard to report environmental harms? Because it's not easy to find how and where to report these environmental harms. A lot of times government agencies have really convoluted ways of reporting these things. So we seek to make this a little easier. Sometimes residents don't know what they're experiencing is a reportable violation. Or that their health could be impacted as a result of the pollution. There's also a complex patchwork of federal, state, and regional environmental regulatory agencies, and you have to have a good understanding of how those things are intertwined and how things are regulated in order for you to know exactly who to call when something's wrong. And so residents don't always have the time to look up this information, right? Or know where to even begin to look it up. So as a result, a lot of environmental impacts go unreported, and residents sometimes don't know what agencies are best to report these to. And this is a real problem because, you know, this these types of reports could influence policies that are made, and so it's important to make sure that there's data and there's research on on these spills and releases, and anything that's happening in the air, water, impacts to public health. And so when these impacts are reported to somebody like the PADEP or another agency, we at Protect PT or other groups that are in the area or around the state we can't follow up unless the resident lets us know that they've made that complaint. So this is one thing that our mobile app can resolve. So the goals of our app are to give residents the tools and education and educate them on the impacts of local fossil fuel development and how to advocate for themselves, how to be watchdogs in their community, to provide Protect PT with enough information to follow up on those complaints. So we can do things like right to know requests or FOIA requests based on the data and information that residents have told us they are reporting. And then we can hold operators and regulators accountable for appropriately responding to these environmental violations. A good example of this is we had reported violations for I think it was over the course of 3 or 4 years, and DEP did absolutely nothing except send stacks of paper to the operator saying, you're in violation of state and federal law. You're in violation of state and federal law. And it's like, well, at some point, something has to happen. There has to be some type of process for penalties. There needs to be some type of legal process to hold these operators accountable that are breaking these state and federal laws. And the only way to do that, and the only way to have that information, is to gather it somehow. And so this is one of the ways that the mobile app will help us. Um, and so it also makes a good research tool because it's accessible. The app is really just a web, it's just a web app. It's a mobile responsive link, so you can access it from anywhere, any device. That was really important to us because we know that there are lots of different folks in our community, and they all have levels, different levels of access to networks, access to devices, access to technology that they can understand. And so we wanted to make it really, really simple and easy for people to report anything on any device anywhere. So there's no worries about compatibility issues. Um, and Ellen, is there anything else that you wanted to add in here? If I don't know if I'm going through all this, or if you have something to add, or if I'm just going to go through.
No, I think we're good on this slide, but if I can think of anything, I'll chime in.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, really, the app is a good research tool because it's just simply an adaptive questionnaire that incorporates some expert advice. So, we got some advice when making the app. We looked at
One note. So for Isabel, an adaptive questionnaire is one that, depending on the response of the participant, the next question that comes up can change depending on
Okay.
the feedback that was given the first time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks for that definition. Yeah, so we looked at other devices, other tools that existed, and we really wanted to, had our set of goals that we wanted to accomplish, and we didn't find anything that really fit the bill. So while it's a really arduous process to develop another tool, we just felt like we had to develop a tool because we wanted to make sure that it was something that would be useful for all the goals that we needed to meet. And so the cool thing about this is, so you can enter an address that you're reporting from, or you can enter where, so an address, or it can pick up your GPS location. So like if you don't know where you are, if you're in the middle of a field and you're just like, I don't see a road sign, I don't know where I am, you can hit use my current GPS location and it'll pull it up, and that's where you're reporting, right? Or if you're, let's say you're on your way to work and you see something, you know where that's happening, but just can't respond to it then. When you get to work, you can tell us where that observation happened. Also important because we work in tandem with citizen science. We do citizen science air monitoring, water monitoring, and noise monitoring around shale gas development and other infrastructure. We want to know, is this an independent observation? Is this part of a baseline study that you're conducting with us? Or is this part of a development study that you're conducting with us? So we do baseline as well as development because when we were looking at all the research that was done on shale gas development, we saw that there was not a lot of baseline that existed. And that research is really important to us because it tells us what a community was like before the shale gas industry got there. You just don't see that a lot in research.
Right.
And then what do you want to report? So there's a variety of things that you can report. And we tried to have a delicate balance between being detailed enough that people would understand what we were saying, but also not so detailed that it was arduous to fill out the questionnaire. So anything from noise pollution, vibrations, light pollution, air pollution, and of course, under air pollution might be dust and debris or spills, but somebody might not understand that a dust is technically an air pollution. So we kind of broke it down a little bit more. health impacts, truck traffic, those types of things. And then, so the next screen would be based on the response that you get, you would go through a series of questions based on that response that would hit all of these different points one after another. So the first thing here, you'd go to the noise screens and it would say, you can describe the noise, and you go through a series of questions related to noise. So here on this screen, we're talking about kind of like what those next questions are. So how loud is the noise, right? And we've got some comparable noise. A lot of cell phones also have a decibel reader. You could actually download a decibel. In fact, on my watch has a decibel, which meter, which I think is really cool too. And so also in a part, it's not just about decibels, right? Sometimes we have this low vibration that we feel when drilling in particular and fracking is occurring, and it's not maybe something that's really loud, but it's very disruptive to us. So then how are residents actually impacted, and how's that disrupting their daily lives? So that's important. People can upload videos and give additional details. There's a thank you screen, and then there's a closing page with general information on who to contact. In the case of a local municipality, so noise in Pennsylvania is regulated locally, even though there is some EPA guidance. We would want to talk to our local officials about the noise so we can actually track the noise. If someone says that they're not a part of the study, but they're experiencing the noise, we can contact them and say, hey, do you want to be a part of a noise study?
Mhm. Jillian, could you speak a little bit to how you collaborated with Cynthia Richburg on developing this part of the questionnaire?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Cynthia Richburg, she's an audiologist. At the time, she was working at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Now she's actually, I think, still at Wichita State in Kansas. And she had a noise study that she had done. And I believe we have a slide with the link to the study later. But we developed our noise monitoring studies around her research. So she had done some studies around shale gas. Again, nothing baseline, just while development was happening. And she had learned how to study noise in this citizen science kind of a way that was relatively inexpensive and captured the data that she wanted. This study was peer reviewed, and you can find it online. And then after she kind of took us through what equipment she used, what equipment we could buy, how to conduct the study, what protocols to incorporate in our study. Part of that was these daily observations that people are experiencing and how important that is. And initially she had like this whole big list of a table that every hour somebody would have to fill out what they were experiencing. And I was like, that is just too, like, that's too arduous for people to do.
Right.
Not going to do that. So this, when things are noticed by someone, when it's happening right now to you, you can go on the mobile app and boom, right there. You tell what's happening and report it and have it time stamped. And so you don't have to worry about, like, if it's 4 a.m., you grab your phone, you go through the process in the mobile app. It takes a minute. You might not be able to go back to sleep if it's that loud, but you can at least record the data that you need to record and then look at it later.
Wow.
Okay, and then this is also incorporating expert device in particular for health impacts. We have a wonderful organization, Southwest Environmental Health Project, or Southwest PA Environmental Health Project, and they have health professionals on staff, public health professionals, and we said, here are all the things that we think, based on the chemicals in fracking, are some symptoms that people could it be experiencing? And they helped us organize it in a way that if someone goes through this process of this questionnaire, one of the last things they can do is actually print out their own report. And you can print out all the reports of all of the things that you've put in on your system. And then you can then take that data and give it to your doctor. And what they did is they helped us organize the data in a way that the doctor would understand exactly how to take them through a diagnosis. So symptoms could include things like sore throat, irritation, sinus problems, and coughing, shortness of breath, wheezing, nosebleeds, headache and dizziness, sleep disturbance, anxiety, fatigue, rashes on the skin. So this is in particular if you have well water or have water contamination, and you're exposed to fracking chemicals. They can be itching your skin, burning eyes, itching of eyes, nausea, abdominal pain. Again, if you're ingesting fluids, irritability and mood swings, and other things. So not only do we have observations of what the person is knows is happening based on what they see, based on how they feel, but also what are some other things. And what we did is with every single observation, we ask again, are you having any health related concerns or observations? Because someone might not know that their stuffy nose could be associated with air pollution. And so if they're reporting air pollution, of course we're going to ask them, are you having any health impacts? And so sometimes that might get people thinking, well, actually, yes. And I didn't know that it was related, but it could be related. And so I want to document that.
Mhm.
So how this tool could benefit your research? So do you want to go ahead and speak on
Yes.
this?
Yes, I'll go ahead. So what I was thinking was I was going to take us through one example of a study that had actually been that's being presented at this conference on Sunday, actually 8:30 to 10 a.m. Session. And then we could think about how this kind of tool could benefit this kind of research study. So the study in question is by Jonathan Tollefson and Scott Frickel. And it looks at how patterns of industrial and residential churning, which means like the way that demographics and the way industries are located in a city evolve over time, how that has shaped environmental inequality. So is it like, for example, is it more working class based, like class based, or is it more race based? And the authors, I think, find that historically it's been more class based and it's been moving toward more race based. And so the data used by this particular study is mainly data of particular fossil fuel industrial sites. And what they look at is basically they try to identify what's called manufactured gas production and storage sites from historical maps. And so basically these sites are sites that historically people produced natural gas there in cities before it got moved to the countryside. And they look at historical maps and they developed a machine learning method that allows them to identify where these sites are. Sorry, I hope that's clear. So the advantage of using Jillian's tool, for example, would be that we have many more types of data now than just the site data. And obviously, I want to acknowledge that this is a historical study, so obviously it can't rely on self-report data. But if this were a contemporary study, you would still have an advantage for using this tool because the data sets that we have on natural gas production and coal production tend to be very disparate. So this here actually produces multiple data points per individual. So there's no other data set that actually looks at health data, that looks at noise data that looks at leaks and dust and air pollution all at the same time. And even for studies that don't look at self-report data, I think that this tool really touches on why anybody who studies like fossil fuel sites from a sociological point of view or from a social science point of view would care about this, which is how these sites are experienced by the residents who live right next to the site. So since there's only 2 people listening right now, what I wanted to suggest is maybe you could give me your research background a little bit, and maybe we could play around with how you could use this tool, or if this is not your research at this time, like how would you want to use this tool? Isabel, you want to start us off maybe?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I mean, my brain was just flying while you were showing the app because Exxon built a plastics plant, and I mean, it is right, it is so close to the schools, and there are a ton of neighborhoods that initially when they were built there, it was kind of to get away from our area. Um, and so I mean, they are dealing with, Exxon's ground flaring that's huge. There's a railroad line that has been going through communities like at 3 o'clock in the morning, at noon. There's, I think it's Volstapine maybe, or maybe it's Chenier. There's the humming of the plant. Get pictures from people who are spotting flaring. I mean, there's so much. And we even have a group here that's recently purchased air monitors, but the problem with the air monitors is that they only keep track of specific things. And so it's very incomplete. And sometimes I mean, there's just so many things that happen. I was just thinking like the Hillcrest community, it's a fence line community along what we call Refinery Row. You know, we've been talking about how we're refinery region now. And so I feel like this could be something that people would want to be able to do, is accessible, and maybe not cost prohibitive. I'm really curious, would we use your app? Or would you be connecting us with somebody so that we could do modifications? So I'm thinking more like in terms of opportunities. Maybe there's like the Applied Sociology Journal, we could talk about this, but we're really just in this space where there's so much industrial build out, and there's some environmental activism that's been happening in Corpus for a while, but they built in another county, San Pat County, which is right next to us, and part of like Exxon Sabiqu's in one of their talks was that San Pat didn't have an EJ presence. And so they were going to keep monitoring us so that it didn't spread. But there's definitely I mean, I'm a part of our group for the greater good is part of a coalition of like 14 organizations that are really starting to be aware of, what's going on, but not having a way to, again, like the accessibility of the reporting. I just feel like there's so much that can be done with this. So I don't know, it's more of applying, right? And then trying to work on how do we frame it so that so that it gets recognized, because industry basically the newspaper is industry's propaganda piece.
Yeah, so I can speak to that if you'd like. So you're right, air monitoring is so difficult. And we're relying on these low cost air monitoring equipment, these air monitors that maybe do PM 2.5, or we actually have one. We have some that are called air vis monitors that were created by. It's called the Create Lab at CMU, Carnegie Mellon University here in Pittsburgh, and they have a VOC monitor, but it's not species specific. So you're just getting the amount of VOCs and the spikes. And so how we've actually used this in a real world scenario is we have around an injection well, they have where they vent the tanks to put in more fluid and vent the explosive, air, the gas that comes to the top of the tank before injection. And so when that venting happens, residents were reporting really bad smells, like this acidy, just really nasty smell. And so what we did is we put a VOC monitor at the home of this resident. There was also truck traffic impacts. So we wanted to decide, okay, well, what's a truck traffic impact? Because that gives off VOCs versus this venting, and how can we delineate the two? And so we also deployed a trail cam, which is really inexpensive, right? And then we use observations through the app. So the resident can tell, okay, the venting is happening right now. We can then take the data from the VOC monitor, take the real world observation from the resident, compare the two, and we know exactly that that spike is associated with that venting. So it's really, it's because air monitoring is a really complex issue, right? And we're also working to integrate a code with, like, an API code with our coder, our developer that happened to develop the app. And I will say, I feel very fortunate that our app was done all on with the volunteers. So it took a long time. Now to recreate it, it wouldn't take as long, obviously, but it was done all volunteers. We are
Wow.
yeah, we have we call it a community lunch and learn on our YouTube if you want to look and dive a little bit more into that and how it was developed. But yeah, so now the same developer that worked with our app is now trying to develop this API code for us that will help us um, uh, get email alerts when those VOC spikes happen. That way we have another kind of triggering, and then the VO spike would happen. We'd get an email, and we could deploy something like a Suma canister that would do that grab sample of air, because Suma canisters are really expensive and it's really hard to deploy them. That we could get that grab sample and take it to the lab and see exactly what the species of what people are breathing in.
Great. So Jenny, I know you joined us a little late, but let me know if you wanna. You're muted right now. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
No.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I was intrigued because I'm not familiar with this project. I guess my question would be, as a professor who teaches a course on environmental justice and research methods, I'm always looking for ways to involve undergrads. And this seems like it would have potential. And I'm curious if you've seen any involvement in any place that might serve as a model.
Shelley, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sorry, my cat was on a tear and now my dog is barking, so I'm working from home today because we had a press conference earlier today. So yes, so EJ communities, they have very limited resources, and we have these wonderful young minds in our undergrad community, where we have students that are research that are looking to do research, and they're looking to get out in the field and experience real world science, right? So we actually have a really robust internship program for the summer where we employ undergrads and graduate level students to help us go out and do the citizen science monitoring. So we will train them on the monitoring protocols, and they can install the equipment, which takes a lot of time to go out and install a monitor. Depending on where it is, then we teach them to how we're going to analyze the data, and then they can help us write reports on the mobile app. So when a report comes in from the app, I'll give a good example. So with the injection well, there was an air event last week. The resident called me right away and said the air smells terrible. What do I do? I looked at the VOC monitor, and sure enough, it was spiking. So I didn't have a Suma canister, but she made the report, and then we actually turn that report from the app, we pull it into a format. And so we have a template that undergrads can learn how to put in, different things. So we de-identify as much as we can the data, and also encourage, and this is a big reason why we made the tool in the first place. We encourage, when someone reports, to also report it to a government agency. So when you hit report, when you submit your report, the next screen that's going to come up is reported to a government agency. And so if you click on that button, it's actually going to route you in Pennsylvania. It'll route you to, based on your report, let's say it's air or water, for instance, it'll take you right to the DEP complaint form. So right to the and then the app tells us what county you're in, right? So that tells us what office, if we were going to do a right to know request, to get that information to see how the DEP responded to that complaint down the road, we could do a right to know request, and we know exactly what office to ask. We know, and this could be used all over Pennsylvania, so it doesn't matter where you are. And of course, we're really small, so we deal with certain counties in Pennsylvania, but let's say we're getting information from folks in Philly. There's actually folks in Westchester right now that are working around the Mariner East pipeline. They're flaring, and they're actually seeing radioactivity from Geiger counters coming off of that flaring from the LNG Mariner East pipeline. And so they can report that, they can show videos, they can upload their videos to the app, and then they can have that documented right out in the field where they are. And so it aids them in that watchdogging effort as well.
All right, I have a few more slides, and the last one actually speaks a little bit to Jenny's question. So maybe I'll just finish the presentation and then we can open it up completely. Jillian, since you have the presentation open, can you move one more? Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, can you actually play that? That video, does that work? I actually did an interview with somebody who lived right next to a coal mine. And they have coal trucks passing by every few minutes. And it's sort of crazy, like in a very rural area in County. It's still so loud. And this is that doing a more quantitative study, which this tool I think is more geared towards. It sort of like adds this like slight sort of emic.
Hear that? Yeah. Oh, look. Dump truck through all their solid waste.
So that was at a fracking site in Elizabeth Township, which is in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. And these folks lived right across from the access road, and it was so tremendously loud. Our noise studies we did front yard noise studies and backyard noise studies to compare the difference between the fracking and the truck traffic, and it was so loud that just standing in their driveway when we were putting the equipment in, it was tremendous. And they had a lot of impacts from noise, and it's anxiety and stress as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing that you might not expect is that traffic is a big part of the noise of the frac site, for example. And other things that a study like this can also show is that there's different phases of well pad production, and they have like different kinds of sounds that go with that as well. So the production phase tends to be louder than the development phase is louder than the production phase. But there's different types of sounds that are associated with these different kinds of phases. And also there is like, again, if you're doing a quantitative study, this is a useful component. There is sort of a part that's sort of an open-ended part of the questionnaire where people can just speak about to their experiences of the noise. And experience of sound is subjective. So depending on the person or the age of the person, for example, the sound is going to be experienced differently. And I think the study that Jillian did with Dr. Cynthia Richburg, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, also might have shown that even that the decibel, like the sound of fraxite is experienced as more disruptive as other noises that are as loud, because the sounds are unusual and somewhat abrupt. So I don't know if that's correct.
So I just want to mention, so we did not do the study with Dr. Richburg. We based our monitoring protocols and studies that we do currently on her research and her methods and protocols that she developed while she was doing her study. And then also she got her peer review back, and some of the things that she learned as a result of the peer review. We also modified our studies to incorporate that feedback as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the correction. So then the last thing is, for those of us who care about the social impacts of our work, I think that I've spoken to a lot of graduate students who are doing research on sort of environmental sociology, environmental communication, which is my field, or like climate change communication. And there's some frustration with the peer review process, for example, that it's slow and it's cumbersome. And by the time, the data comes out, it's probably not really accurate anymore, because like if a frac site opens up, it moves pretty quickly. So the advantage of if you were to work together with an environmental group would be that if you're collaborating with them, the data has immediate impact. So you're collecting it for your study, but then the environmental group can use it for their purposes as well. And the use of the tool really helps to engage and educate residents. So Jenny, you missed the beginning of the presentation, but like there are certain types of violations that are really actually very hard to even know that they're violations. And if we do know that they're violations, it's a little bit hard to figure out who to report to, or how to even describe it in a way that environmental agencies can really process that information. So that app is really useful for that. The piece about who to report to, that's developed for only Pennsylvania. So in Texas, that part would need to be adapted to the state of Texas for that part to be useful. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think that this is an understudied problem, and it's a sort of misunderstood problem, but anybody who's experienced this firsthand, and even for me who just like talked to people who've experienced this firsthand, it's an incredibly important issue for the people who live right next to fossil fuel development. And it's extremely disruptive to their lives. And I think that the local media doesn't really do a good job of reporting this. So we have a really important role. We should have an important role of researchers to shed light on this issue and to fill this gap that's really sort of left open by the local media.
Yeah, and actually, we have a media issue here, like you were describing, and one of the things that we decided to do is make a series of videos of lived experiences of people, and just have people tell their story on video. And so people could upload their videos. You can actually upload your videos into the app. If it's too big, then you'd have to directly email it to us. But there are resources on the app to be able to find that information easily, to be able to call us and say, hey, can we email you this? But we are developing just a simple Google form that we're going to have people start collecting. We're going to start collecting their stories stories and then do that marketing ourselves, because this is just not getting enough attention in our region, and people's voices are not being heard. And ultimately, we want to have the real world experiences drown out the propaganda from the industry.
All right, yeah, so this is it. Can we just, yeah, so that's the end of our presentation. Isabel, you had 2 questions, and I think we'll just open it up.
Now I have 3. So I'll just say them, and that way I can get them out. But the first one was, how did the internships, who are they with? And how did that get established? You know, was it you reaching out to the university, or was it the other way around? 2, I'm curious about your background, and how are you able to get these connections? And 3, I was curious about like civic engagement, because I feel like in our community, there's a lot of apathy, and I feel like the apathy is a protection mechanism. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're so accustomed to being dismissed. And I mean, like we as people who are, you know, we came together 6 years ago because of some water issues, but you know, it's like we're dismissed, we're ridiculed, misrepresented. And so I feel like the apathy is actually, if you were saying that you cared and trying to do something and repeatedly dismissed, it just makes more sense, self-preservation, to disengage. And so I'm curious about how this has an impact on civic engagement, you know, local politics kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I can. So why don't I address the first one or the last one first?
Okay.
That's the most complex, I think. I agree that there's a lot of apathy. In fact, we went to a meeting that in Plum Borough where the injection well was, and the local government actually had enough, and they were like, we know that people are being impacted, we want them to get together and we want to talk to them. They invited us to the table because they knew we had been involved since 2016, since the EPA hearings. And so just being in the community and being involved did it. And then we made connections with people in the community. So sometimes it's canvassing, you know, door to door. Sometimes it's sending letters, you know, it just all depends. And unfortunately, until someone is feeling the brunt of the impacts, sometimes they don't come around. And by then it's too late. So that is a challenge, an ongoing challenge with this industry, because they will go into a community and say, everything's going to be wonderful. You're never going to know we're here. I mean, that is a direct quote from an oil and gas industry exec that was trying to, you know, sell our community on this. You're never going to know we're here. Meanwhile, 4 years later, and they've destroyed a wetland and everyone knows they're there, and it's terrible. This one gentleman said, I thought you were just a tree hugger. And now I realized you were trying to tell us, you were trying to warn us. So that to me tells me I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Because I don't want my kids to be poisoned, is what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And so you asked me what my background is. I'm a mom. And my background, actually, I worked at, I was a director of admissions at a college. And so I quit my job to raise my kids. And then I had an air pollution issue in my home with the people next door. And I got sick, my kids got sick. It was a big, long battle. And at the end of the day, I realized that the government agencies that are supposed to protect us don't. They don't protect us. So we need to do it ourselves because no one else is going to do it for us. So, and you can tell it was a long, and I still have a lot of anxiety from it, and I still have a trauma from dealing with that issue from my kids being sick. There was actually a recent study that Environmental Health News, Christina Marusik from Environmental Health News, she's here in Pittsburgh, but I think that's a nationwide health news outlet, and she did a study of fracking in around shale fields, and she did air sampling and urine sampling for me and my family. We were supposed to be the test, so we were supposed to be like the control of like what it's like to not live around fracking, because we're more than 5 miles away from the nearest site for now. And then Washington County, those kids that are being sick and dying, they were testing some of the urine samples from those families as well. And while those families had really high levels, our families also had levels that were above what they should be. So it's in our water. It's all around us. And so, I was just coming at it from a mom, and you know, following the school bus up the hill to tell my neighbors, what I had experienced, just with air pollution alone, just with this one source of air pollution, and like how it was going to impact us. So it is, unfortunately, sometimes when we do this work, it's really learning as much as we possibly can on the fly, and not, and really depending on, um, scientists, depending on researchers to do the research that is going to help us prove our point. And so that's why the tool is really effective, because it can further that work. Um, and with connections and internships, we just look to local universities. I post on Indeed, which so can be done offline. So I post on Indeed. I reach out to local universities and colleges, and find out who is available. We get a ton of a ton of requests, and we weed those out, and we really look for some core tenants. Those are on our website. We look for people that have really like a core set of proficiencies, to be able to do this work, and one of that is public service. And recognizing that this is a service that we're doing to the community. So,
Well, I really appreciate you and your work, and I'm so excited. I was texting the other people like, you're gonna have to watch this thing. So I was like, I'm sending this to you so you hold me accountable. So as soon as you get that up, I'm gonna share it, because it's horrible what you're going through. But it's also like inspirational for me. And I know when I share it with the community members, they're gonna be blown away. And we need that. We need to see that there's other people that are doing things, and that we can learn from each other. So I know I'm supposed to be a sociologist, but it's that lens is important, but this is so, like, you're right, the process of peer reviewed journals, and we don't have time for that. It's kind of how I feel. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you.
I want to second everything that Isabel said, and I think your work is really inspiring too. I just want to make a few notes based on my research experience, which is that Jillian's experience is so far from being the exception. Like, I wish it were, but I've talked to so many people who have like really severe environmental impacts from, fossil fuel developments, because that's the field I work in. And the DEP and even the EPA really are pretty much non-responsive. So that was like the big shock for me as a liberal going into rural areas of Pennsylvania, is to realize just how little the DEP is doing, for example. And some of the stuff that it does to sort of deliberately obscure what's going on. So like one of the folks I talked to said that they had this big problem with like coal ash getting everywhere on all the surfaces of their houses, their cars, everything. And he called the DEP, and an inspector came on a snow day. And so everything was covered in snow, and they were like, oh, it's fine. And then they just left. So it's pretty common. And I've talked to some other environmental organizations, and there's like some crazy stories about lawyers at the DEP being fired for doing their jobs, for example, for saying that, console caused the breaking of a dam or something like that. So yeah, and I can't really give like direct sources because I want to protect my sources,
Mhm.
but it's pretty common. Yeah, so
Yeah, and just to that, so depending on where you are, it's really also very difficult to get that public information. We're lucky that Pennsylvania has even though they don't do their job, the DEP doesn't do their job. Um, we do have access to the data to be able to look at and to show that they're not doing their job, which is part of the Attorney General of Pennsylvania's what he's really cracking down on the fracking industry right now, and because there is such a wealth of data around this. So yeah, and I don't know how it is in Texas, but you know we're trying to find ways. Like in Ohio, there's no public process. People don't know until it's in their backyard.
Yeah, we were actually, I was just talking to two people last night. We were talking about maybe doing a kind of, it sounds very much like your community lunch and learn, but you know, because we have somebody who in the last couple of years has come out and helped us, you know, he's walked through. So just somebody from our community that was like, if you look at these permits, you know, the city of Corpus Christi was omitting some very basic standard information, and those permits were still going forward. They weren't stopping, and they were going out of order in the process. And so he was talking about how difficult it was to actually request. They called them deviations here, and so we were talking about he was going to do one. He was like, "It's so much work," and I was like, "Oh, we should like see if we can, you know, who would want to participate, and you could teach us, and we could all, you know, identify which corporations are in our area, and then we could all adopt a certain number of corporations and go through the process with you at the same time and like order food or you know or do a potluck you know so I just yeah I gosh I really I'm sorry you've gone through these things but I'm so grateful for you and for this session. Thank you so much. I'm
hmm,
gonna take a picture of that.
Yeah, I put a contact. So if you look up Livable Arlington, Ranjana is a great person to contact. Also, Halt the Harm Network, which is how I connected with Elena through Halt the Harm. So they're a nationwide network of folks that are working on this issue. There's a lot of people that are working on it.
Mhm.
hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had one more comment actually that I just remembered, which is I think Isabel, you said something about the burden of proof. It's at least like how I frame it to myself is that what I've come to understand from going into those communities is that the way that we prove harm is I mean, I haven't researched it, but it seems like it's geared to fill the interests of the fossil fuel industry. And there's some of it is just like it seems impossible to prove that that damage is really happening. But when you're on the ground and you're talking to people, and you just like the rates of cancer and very strange cancers are just like through the roof. So I think as researchers, we also have sort of a job to correct the record on this, which is that like the way that we have said that it's acceptable to prove harm is just unacceptable and it should be changed. And I'm trying to remember one way that was framed that I thought was really helpful, which was that right now the burden of proof is on us to prove harm, but really we should have a legal framework that would put the burden of proof on the fossil fuel industry to prove lack of harm. And I think that as sort of researcher community, this is like definitely a good entry point for us.
Yeah, one of our experts that speaks at hearings often talks about the precautionary principle, and talks about that very subject, how it is often the burden on us to prove the harm when we should be employing instead the precautionary principle that says until can you prove that it's not going to harm public health, then you should refrain from proceeding essentially. Um, so and we have some lunch and learn stuff on that as well. There's like a whole 2-year catalog of stuff by now. And I'll put, once we're done our presentation, I'll put the link up for you. You guys can.
Thank you.
Jenny, do you have any questions?
No, I just echo what the others have said and thank you for your, yeah, your willingness to share and your courage. So.
Yeah,
So I'm going to, oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for attending, and thanks, Jillian, for your help with this presentation. I was just gonna add one more link in case you're interested in data about the fossil fuel industry. So the Purple Air is really smart like program that basically you can ask them to come to your backyard, and they'll put in like air monitoring, like an air monitor. And I actually spoke to somebody who was living next to a waste treatment facility who said that the air monitor the Purple Air gave them was better than the one that the DEP installed. So it's a really good program, and it helps people to actually know, like, if there's like a bad air day and say, you know, they're having sort of like respiratory symptoms, they can know that they're not crazy and it really is a bad air day. And then Frac Tracker, for anybody who doesn't know about it, is this really great organization that compiles data on fracking and on like the locations of frac wells and other like pipelines. It's a really great website, so I would recommend it. Yeah. Yeah, and we have a survey posted, so if you want to go and fill it out, that would be great.
Yes, please fill out the survey. I also put links in the chat. Hold the Harm Network is a great resource for folks to connect on this issue. And yeah, I would second Frac Tracker has some amazing resources. Lots of data available. And if you need help getting data and don't know how to look it up, they can help with that as well.
Yeah, you can contact them as well. So they have teams in Pennsylvania, but also in Texas and Asia.
Also, Earthworks, I want to mention, I know they're doing work in Texas and around the United States. They have their, I forget what it's called. They come out with a FLIR camera. They've come out several times in our neighborhood and look for methane emissions. So that's another resource as well if you haven't connected with Earthworks.
And if you don't mind, maybe share your email in the chat, so we can also just email you the presentation, Jenny, so you can see the beginning of it. Also, the person who, well, Jonathan, who's the co-author in that study that I cited, that I sort of butchered because it's like actually 1 a.m. here because I'm in Bangkok. It's a long story. And I'm pretty tired. But in any case, I wonder if you would mind if I shared that presentation with him as well, because he actually expressed an interest in it. And it's too bad he couldn't make it. So yeah, if you could let me know if that would be okay. And that's about it. So thanks for coming.
Thank you all for having
Did you
us.
show
I
that
really
the other
appreciate
slide you just set up? Oh, thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
that
much.
one, yeah.
There were a couple more. I was trying to write down the survey link to put in the chat. So this is the study, Dr. Richberg and Jeremy Slagley, who did the concern of living near residents living in close proximity to hydraulic fracturing. And then also one study that informs our work as well is this study by Dr. Michael McCulley, Hayes and Shanikoff, and its public health implications of environmental noise associated with unconventional oil and gas development. And Dr. Michael McCulley is from West Virginia University. He has several studies on shale gas development in West Virginia that are really, really good. And then here's our contact information as well.
All right, I'll just end the recording.